Doherty. Okay, perfect. Hi, guys. Welcome to the latest edition of the Jake's Take with Jacob Ellisher podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Ellisher, the chief content producer and writer of the Jake's Take with Jacob Ellisher podcast and the pop culture website, Jake's Take. Comics has been a huge passion of mine since I was 8 years old, and DC and Marvel have been my two main loves. However, I never have seen a lot of comic book-based YouTube content creation until now when I met Thinking Critical's Wes Daugherity. Now, Wes has had one of the best takes on the comic book scene, and I'm so happy that he's able to take time out of his schedule to talk to me. And Wes, how are you?
I'm doing great. I really appreciate you reaching out and asking me to be on the channel. This is awesome. I love talking comic books.
Yes, thank you so much. So let's talk about Thinking Critical's origin story. Can you share that with my readers?
Yeah, so I was in the military. I recently retired just a few years ago.
Thank you for your service, by the way.
Well, it was my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for saying such a nice thing. So during my time in the military, I don't know if people know this, but a lot of military guys love comic books. At the time, I was kind of more of a Star Wars nerd, more of a sports kind of guy, but the people around me are always bringing in comic books and stuff, and I was reading up, I wasn't really a comic book reader, but then, the MCU came out. Being a film nerd, I was always reading up on the Wikipedia articles and finding other places, the Marvel forums and stuff, and reading up on these characters. I was really interested in finding out the backstories and where all these characters came from, because, it's all based in comic book storytelling. And so I was getting really, really interested in it. And I was about to retire. I was becoming a father for the first time, and I wanted something to share with my son, like me and my father had with baseball. And I remember, playing baseball together in Missouri. It was just some of the best memories of my life. And I thought, I've been enjoying this stuff I've been reading up on comic books. So I started reading up on comic books and started buying them weekly, reading them weekly, and then just developed a real passion for them. And then, I moved to the Philippines. I'm retired here with my wife and two children now. The family's growing, and I had some free time. I am a stay-at-home dad, but I had some creative juices that I needed to quench. So I asked my wife. I was like, "Listen, I think I can do a comic book like YouTube channel. I'm really enjoying this," and she gave me the okay. So that's how Thinking Critical was born.
And besides, I love your channel. It's one of my favorite channels and to look at when it comes to the comic book industry. And quite frankly, 2020 has been big for the comics.
Yeah, it's the channel has definitely changed. I've only been on YouTube for a little bit over a year, and to see how the channel has really evolved over that time. With the comic book industry, and right now it's we're in unprecedented times, so we don't even know what the future holds. But I like being here and having the information for people, and knowing that there's a place that they can come and get reliable, information as far as the comic book industry, maybe things that they should be looking out for, or maybe things that they should be looking out, to avoid and things like that. We do a lot of debunking of bad information. That's one of the things that I really do enjoy about my comics book YouTube channel as well.
I'm so happy that you talked about this, because the thing is, right now there have been some major stories on both major companies. Let's start with DC. The top story has been Dan Didio's firing from DC. What does his dismissal meant from the organization, but also for fans as well?
Well, it signals a change in philosophy. Dan Didio he's very much, he likes to go against the grain. Once he was going down Rebirth and people were happy. They enjoyed the success, but he was really just looking for that next opportunity to take DC kind of in a new direction. Which we saw kind of when Dark Knight's Metal hit really big. He all of a sudden is, whoop, we're going to the Dark Multiverse, and we've been building to that almost for 2 years now with, your Tales from the Dark Multiverse, Year the Villain story arc, the Justice Doom League War that Scott Snyder's been building all this stuff towards. It's quite apparent that when AT&T acquired, Time Warner, Warner Media, DC, all being a part of that they wanted these DC properties not only for the movies, which are a huge business, but they want to get into the streaming business. So they need these characters to do streaming services, with HBO Max coming online and things of that nature. And it's quite clear that his vision for the future of DC Comics did not line up with the division the vision of AT&T and Time Warner and where they wanted to utilize these characters going forward. I think, basically DC was writing stories that AT&T, Time Warner knew that there was no chance they could ever turn into a movie, a streaming show. They were focusing on aspects of the character they didn't want to focus on. One of the last big decisions that Didio made at DC Comics was bringing Brian Michael Bendis over from Marvel and giving him a tremendous amount of influence, giving him both Superman titles. He's brought in a team to write all the Superman books, including Lois Lane. There's a Jimmy Olsen book right now, the writer on Supergirl as well. But he relaunched the Wonder Comics line, the teen imprint, at DC Comics. He's brought other people over, and it just has not been received well. They're bad takes on the character. They don't fit like the DC hopeful universe. They fit something more Marvel style, which is supposed to be, the world outside your window, more things that we experience in everyday life, here in the real world, whereas DC is kind of like the hero or the gods universe where things are really hopeful, uplifting. And, my take on it is that Brian Michael Bendis was taking things in the wrong direction. He was going to be responsible for 20%, or he is responsible for 20% of all DC comics that are going to be published in March and April. 1 out of every 5 he was going to have his fingerprints on. If he wasn't writing it, he was going to be overseeing as far as his Superman line or his Wonder Comics line. And that was way too much influence, and he had to go. Plus, it also created a lot of internal conflict as far as inter-office politics. Dan Didio is known as a politicker. Bendis is known as a politicker. It created friction. I know there's basically, from what I understand, there was basically a faction of Scott Snyder, creators, and a faction of Tom King creators, and that nobody was really getting along. And it really showed in the product. The continuity at DC Comics for the last 9 months has just been horrible. You never know where the characters are.
Yeah, and speaking of which, we're getting into 2 big events that we're going to talk about, which is, let's bring up Death Metal, because Death Metal is literally Scott and Craig Capullo's final superhero curtain call for now with Death Metal. And then, however, you have this looming threat of Generation 5, which a lot of fans are extremely nervous and terrified about, because there have been rumors and speculations about saying, Bruce Wayne Batman's going away, Diana Prince's Wonder Woman's going away, there's going to be a brand new Aqua person, and then so on and so forth. So the thing is, so let's start off now. Generation 5, is it still going to be, are these 2 events going to collide, or is it going to be like more, or they're going to be nonstop event like format? Because with DC doing nonstop event format, it's going to be like a fatigue what's going on with Marvel.
Yeah, we definitely have gotten that. Year of the Villain's been going on for 9 months now. At the beginning, it was almost every ongoing title was tied into Year of the Villain. We have Hell Arisen going on right now. We have Batman, Superman, an ongoing series. These are all leading into Death Metal. Justice League had the Justice Do More story arc, which was a pretty big deal, leading right into Death Metal. And one of the issues that arose and that was talked about was Dan Didio was trying to cram Generation 5, or as he called it, 5G at the time. Terrible name. I'm glad they changed it. It was way too confusing. It sounded like a telephone program, not a comic book story arc. But he was trying to get tie-ins, to Generation 5 into Death Metal, and Scott Snyder was very hesitant. He said, "You know what? This is my event. I've been building to this for 5 years now. Death Metal was a huge hit. Or I'm sorry, Dark Knight's Metal was a huge hit. This is the sequel. I don't have enough room for this Generation 5 stuff. And quite frankly, I don't know if I'm even on board with it anyway." And he was very hesitant. And one of the rumors is that's one of the reasons that Dan Didio got in bad, was seen in bad light, because he was causing friction among the top talent. But as far as I understand now, is Scott Snyder has a key creative voice at DC Comics ever since Didio's been gone. He's stated, on social media, Death Metal's getting bigger in every way. So that means to me that the The story arc has probably gotten bigger. If it was originally 5 issues, maybe it's 6 or 7 now. The tie-ins must be bigger now. Maybe they tied in a few extra of issues. One of the coolest parts about Dark Knight's Metal was all the one-shots.
That explained all the evil Batmen and women.
Yeah, Dawnbreaker, the Red Death, like all those cool characters. The Batman and Last, of course, being the key among them. It sounds like we're going to get more stuff like that. I want a Batman dinosaur.
Yeah, that looks pretty cool. That looks for when I saw the artwork on Newsarama, and it looked so cool seeing a Dark Knight Batman, a bat dino.
Yeah, it looks nuts. I want to see that story. But with Scott Snyder having a bigger creative voice as far as where things are going, it sounds like Death Metal is leading into Generation 5 now, because Scott Snyder is changing Generation 5. He's changing the lead up to it, which I assume to mean the Generation 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 stories. Those one-shots that we were getting from Venditti, Brian Michael Bendis, Josh Williamson, those one-shots that were going to lead up that we didn't see in the June solicitations that we expected. But he also, as far as I've been told, is that the ending, the Generation 5 and the direction of DC catapulting out of that are changing because of Scott Snyder. He's helping them fix it. So it sounds like there is going to be some synergy between Death Metal and Generation 5, which I think is just smart business. Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo are one of the few creative pairings in all of comics that are licensed to print money. When they get together and they do something, it feels special. It feels like a happening, in the comic industry. And it would be foolhardy of DC Comics to not take advantage of this, and for Scott Snyder not to take advantage of this, having a little bit more creative influence to tie them in together and see if he can push DC in the right direction moving forward.
I've had the opportunity to meet and get to see Scott Snyder and Greg in person. Probably the two best creators, most fan-friendly creators I've ever met. And I trust their vision wholeheartedly. And the thing is, we also have another big event that just happened that fans that saw a return of not one, but 2 legendary super teams with Doomsday Clock.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is with that, we now have Doomsday Clock as well to deal with the Return of Justice Society. And another video I wanted to talk to you about was your Robert Venditti Secret Project. Mm-hmm. And you all said it was Superman. I think that could happen, but also another character we cannot ignore is Justice Society of America. Now, we all know that Jeff Johns is a busy man, but would you think he would put his foot down and say, I'm taking these characters back?
Okay, so we always knew part of Rebirth was the Justice Society of America returning. Of course, Jeff Johns was the creative architect of Rebirth, and that's why it was amazing. Of course, he also did Doomsday Clock. My assumption all along has been that Jeff Johns is doing Justice Society of America. Now, if he isn't doing Justice Society of America, there is no better writer at DC Comics qualified to do a story like that will fit into the lore of DC and flesh those characters out and make them even better than Robert Venditti. Maybe Peter Tomasi, but I don't even think he would do it as well as Robert Venditti with what he's done with Hawkman, with what he did with the Green Lantern Corps, what he did before he ever arrived at DC Comics with X-O Manowar at Valiant Comics. He would be the very best candidate if Jeff Johns isn't available. So the reason we didn't talk about JSA was because the assumption always has been that it is a Jeff Johns project. But if it's not, please let it be a Robert Venditti project. He would kill it on that series.
I agree, and I read his early Justice League, and I'm like, why did we stop? Why did he stop? It was a really good putting Madame Xanadu in the league. I never thought of that idea before.
Also, yeah, the great the friction between John Stewart and Bruce Wayne is, John Stewart is the head of the Green Lantern Corps. He's a war veteran. Bruce Wayne is a vigilante. Who do you want leading you into and strategizing this big battle with an army of Supermen? I want John Stewart, but of course Bruce Wayne, is not going to take it well. So I love the friction that he created between those two characters, and his story on Justice League is great. But he did say in an interview he wants to keep doing Hawkman. The double ship titles burn him out, and it's hard to keep up. And he said he got offered a dream project that was obviously is once a month. That fits Superman. That fits Wonder Woman, Aquaman. Of course, it would fit Justice Society of America as well. So I am disappointed that he's leaving Justice League, but Justice League was left in good shape by Scott Snyder. There are other titles out there that, whether it be a Superman that could really use that helping hand, or a Justice Society that could really use somebody like Venditti to reintroduce them into the DC universe and do it the right way.
Awesome. So now we're talking about the DC universe. Let's get to the characters. So this is 2020 has been a big year. We've had a lot of anniversary issues. We've seen Robin's anniversary issue be published. Joker, Catwoman, and the Green Lantern are all on their way. We just saw Wonder Woman and Flash publish their 750th issues respectively. How has DC Comics executed these milestones?
Well, they've been enormously successful. I mean, if you look at Action Comics 1000, Detective Comics 1000, those are the best sellers for the entire years that they were released. And that, I believe Action was a $6 or $7 comic. No, it was $8, and then Detective Comics was a $10 comic book.
Both worth, by the way, both of them were totally worth it.
Yeah, those are great. Wonder Woman $7.50 is $8. I believe Flash $7.50 is $8. So they're making bank, and people are really enjoying them. I'm not the biggest fan of anthologies personally, because I get kind of caught up in the discrepancy between the best story and the worst story, and I would rather have more of the best. But they're doing a great job. Robin 750 or not Robin 750, Robin 80th anniversary celebration it's a good comic. There are some duds in there, but that Jason Todd, Judd Winnick, Dustin Wynn story, it almost makes you cry when you read it. It was just beautiful.
Especially with Judd Winnick and Jason Todd, because since he was the creator essential, bring him back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the simplicity of the story, and basically a 10 to 12 page story, just the way he knocked it out of the park. We got to see the Super Sons again. I missed that comic book. We got some Dick Grayson stories. My second favorite character at DC Comics. So it was done well. Would I preferred it to be 100 pages of Dick Grayson? Well, maybe. But what they gave us was good. They're knocking it out of the park with these milestone issues. They're doing way better than Marvel. When you look at like Marvel Comics 1000, that was I don't want to use the word abomination, but I'm going to use it. That was an abomination. That was unreadable.
I agree completely. So speaking of hopefully something that's going to be really good, Jeff Johns and Jason Fabok's Batman 3 Jokers is finally being published starting in June. It's a 3-part Black Label story. And then, so how's it going to differ from Doomsday Clock, and why are fans like ourselves excited for the story?
Well, I mean, Doomsday Clock, you're talking about the sequel to what many would say is the greatest comic book in the history of the world, Watchmen. Introducing those characters into the DC universe, explaining why all these things were happening during Rebirth, as far as the smiley face button from the comedian showing up, and all of a sudden we realize that Dr. Manhattan is behind all this. He's the one that sucked Wally out, and he's kind of responsible for all these crises that have happened in DC Comics over the year. So that's huge. Like, we're talking to be able to execute a story of that scope the way that Jeff Johns and Gary Franks did is just jaw-dropping. I can't believe they did it. So when we look at 3 Jokers, a concept introduced right at the end of the New 52 in the Darkseid War story arc, Batman sits on the Mobius chair, becomes aware that there are 3 men using the Joker persona. We jump over to Rebirth after that. He's still aware of it. He says he's going to track him down. So we always knew that this was going to be a part of Rebirth. But Rebirth is over. Doomsday Clock is even over. So that was the last remnants of Rebirth. So what is 3 Jokers now? It's certainly it's Black Label, so it's not even really a part of continuity. But it's going to be an amazing story. It's Jeff Johns writing the greatest villain in comic book history, and one of the 2 or 3 best villains in the history of fiction. When you're talking, or at least American fiction, when you're talking Darth Vader. Maybe Joker's number 2. That's a really important character. And Jason Fabok on art, are you kidding me? If you can't pair up Jeff Johns with Gary Franks, Jason Fabok's as good as it gets. So it's going to be an amazing story. I can't wait to see what they do with it. It's Black Label, so all bets are off. They can do what they want with it. to a certain degree. There was the Batwing controversy, and they found out where that glass ceiling at AT&T was after the purchase. But I think we're going to see some Joker with a crowbar, reminders of what happened to Jason Todd, some of the other things.
Killing Joke especially. I heard that with these Jokers that they picked out, the original Joker from Bob King and Bill Finger universe, you also in Jerry Robinson universe, you also have the Killing Joke Joker from Alan Moore that paralyzed Barbara Gordon. Yep. You also have, of course, the classic, as you mentioned before, the crowbar Joker from Death in the Family.
Yeah, so it's going to be exciting. How does he put all of this together? I don't know, but I couldn't be more excited. The whole book is done. That's the best part. There will be no delays. Every page has already been illustrated. The book's ready to go.
I gotta say, that would be my very first Black Label book, is Batman 3 Jokers, and I'm so happy for this. But however, we gotta switch universes. Mm-hmm. We gotta talk about the Marvel. We gotta talk about what's going on in the House of Ideas. So right now, there are two big stories that are emerging quickly from the House of Ideas. One is the upcoming Avengers and Fantastic Four Empire, and Jonathan Hickman's revival of the X-Men franchise. It seems like with all the Marvel has been dominating all the charts, of selling probably 7 to 8 or even almost all 10 of the top 10 charts. They've had products there. So can Marvel, in your humble opinion, can Marvel keep this up, and why or why not?
Well, they certainly can. X-Men has been a huge part of that. Jonathan Hickman's X-Men is one of the best ongoing comics in the industry right now. X-Force isn't up in the top 10, but that's also been very high quality. People are really interested in these one-shot, giant-size X-Men titles. Ten of Swords is coming up. It's an X-Men-related event. So
I'm excited for that.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Our Batman is still outselling every other Marvel ongoing series besides X-Men, but, Marvel is riding the wave of X-Men success, which they should do. Dawn of X has been a really huge hit, following up on House of X Powers of 10. Will they continue it? It all depends on the reception to death metal. If that is a huge hit, no, DC Comics will go up and they'll own the top 10 again. And if hopefully they build excitement going into Generation 5 and they'll be competitive again. But they're not competitive right now. The only ongoing series that is shipping over 50,000 is Batman. Marvel Comics has way more than that. They got X-Men, they got Amazing Spider-Man, they got Immortal Hulk. There's a couple in there that are also in there that are kind of slipping my mind right now. But DC doesn't have a lot exciting going on right now as they're waiting for death metal to happen. So Marvel is absolutely pounced, and they've been pantsing DC now for basically since House of X Powers of 10 started. And Dawn of X has been great. As far as Empire goes, it looks like that is going to bomb really hard.
Really?
Yes, it is not looking good for that series. Basically, the way it started was Marvel Comics 1000 introduced this idea of reintroduced the Masked Rider, and he's got an ancient. I can't remember the name of the MacGuffin that he has.
Yeah, but he's like the Phantom Stranger. Is he like the Phantom Stranger?
He's a character introduced like in the 20s. I wasn't really familiar with it. I read Marvel Comics 1000. I didn't like it. I didn't like the way the story was told, so I didn't actually read up on it, to be honest. But that was that moved forward. There was Marvel Comics 1001, which wasn't a hit, but it moved forward into Incoming, which was, marketed as an event comic book, but really it was a $10 preview comic, and they introduced the events that are happening in Empire, but people are really turned off by that $10 that they paid for a preview. Like normally you should be paying people should be giving you preview information. Like, can you imagine people charging you the same amount for the trailer as a movie?
Oh yeah.
Like that's infuriating. So I have a couple of retailers that are on the channel a lot. They're not seeing orders for Empire yet, and you would have expected that by now. I have a couple of other friends that order for shops. They're not seeing orders for Empire. So there's not a lot of buzz, even though it's X-Men, or I'm sorry, it's not X-Men. It's Avengers, and it's a Fantastic Four, Kree-Skrull War, which has kind of been done to death. And there is an X-Men tie-in and things of that nature, but it doesn't look like it's going to be the big hit that Marvel Comics was really anticipating, Absolute Carnage being the last big one. This one's probably going to be more like War of the Realms, maybe kind of a hit. One of the titles, the main series probably does okay, but all the tie-ins, maybe besides X-Men, look like they're going to be DOA.
I have to agree with you. And one event that we got to talk about that could be DOA is this Infinite Destinies. So basically, this story is, for those of you who don't know, the Infinity Stones are coming back, and they're getting classic. And this time, they're going to divide for my understanding, you can jump in here. They're putting on annuals from different our fan favorite characters like Black Cat, Guardians of the Galaxy, Iron Man, and they're going to be meeting up with Amulet, the Prince of Power, and Star. Characters have been introduced for us for the past 2 to 3 years. Mm-hmm. And what do you expect from this story? And are they missing the point by they're putting all the annuals together, or not making a miniseries?
So this is something that Marvel used to do, I believe, in the 80s and 90s, where they would do an event series or an event story in the annual so it wouldn't bleed over into the main series line and there wouldn't be interruptions. So in that idea, I kind of appreciate that, because you can keep reading your Amazing Spider-Man and you don't have the one-off or the two-off that tie into this Infinite Destinies storyline. What's interesting is Adam Warlock in Infinity Warps, I believe it was, he basically he rediscovered the Infinity Stones, which were destroyed, I believe, in Jonathan Hickman's Infinity, and he gave them free will. They're essentially sentient now, so they're almost like Hal Jordan's power rings. When a Lantern passes away, they go and they find a new host that's ready. So the stones are looking for hosts. So we've seen Star has a stone. We know what's his name. The one to do with time has like the time stone. Prince of Power being Hercules, he's going to have a stone. So these are all going to these characters, but they're not all good guys and they're not all bad guys. So in some of these, they might be team up books. In some of them, they might be the long-standing good character versus a bad guy, which is what it appears that the Tony Stark Iron Man annual book is going to be. So do I think it's going to be a huge hit? No, but I appreciate that they aren't interrupting the main series with it. And I don't really think it's not really an event. It's really a reintroduction of the Infinity Stones into the Marvel Universe so they can do the next event when Thanos comes back and starts murdering all these people that have the stones so he can make his Infinity Gauntlet again.
Thanos and the Infinity Stones are like peanut butter and jelly. You can't have one without the other.
Yeah. We know that he's coming back. We saw him in Guardians of the Galaxy. So he's out there. Once he finds out that these people have the stones inside of him, he's going to go and murder them all and try to put the gauntlet back together and destroy the world.
Alrighty, so let's talk about Amazing Spider-Man, because they're this title's having its 850th. The march is on to its 850th milestone title, which is a very big title for a lot of the Marvel book comics, because I've never seen on the Marvel side 850 issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so what does this milestone mean for Marvel? And also, this is the first time that Dan Slott is not attached to it, because he was attached to 600, he was attached to 700, and he was attached to 800.
Yeah, Dan Slott had a long, I wouldn't call it illustrious run, but he had a long run on the character. We saw sales dip to not all-time lows, but close to it. And it felt for a long time when Dan Slott was on Amazing Spider-Man that he just like creatively tapped out. Like he just didn't really have much anymore. But I'll give him this. He brought it, for Spider-Man 800, with the Red Goblin and all that kind of stuff going. And
that was probably 800 is probably one of my all-time favorite issues.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm not sure what happened. I don't know if Dan Slott, locked himself in a room, cut off his internet, and said, "I'm writing the best story of my career," or one of the best. But that was a great issue. So I will applaud him on that, because he definitely delivered the goods. Because on these milestone issues, Marvel Comics is going to charge between $8 and $10 for the comic book. So it's good that people got their bang for their buck. What does $8.50 mean? I'm assuming it means it's an 80-page comic book, maybe 64 somewhere in there. It's an $8 to $10 comic. It's going to be the culmination of something. We know in the free comic book day from Marvel that it was setting up a Venom and a Spider-Man event. I believe it was setting up both. I believe that this was probably what that was setting up. Of course, free comic book day is canceled, so I imagine that'll probably just come out as some type of special one-shot now. At some point, with everything going on, everything's kind of up in the air right now.
Yeah, and not to mention you have two different unique Spider-Man villains. One is Kindred, this mysterious monster that has ties to everybody. And then you also have the Sin Eater, a character that we haven't seen since the 80s.
Yeah, Sin Eater is an interesting character. It definitely brings back some fond memories. I think people will be happy with that one. I'm not sure about Kindred, but it all ends up in the execution. If Nick Spencer does a good job, they have a great artistic team. You have Humberto Ramos, you got Ryan Otley, you do get Patrick Gleason on those comic books. So that's an important book for Marvel Comics. No other comic at Marvel gets that quality of artist every single issue. Not even X-Men does. So it's obviously that they put a lot of focus on that. And if Nick Spencer brings the goods on the way to 850, people will come along with him. His Hunted story arc was great. Do I think the rest of his Amazing Spider-Man run has been great? Well, some of it's been pretty darn good, but it's too bad. Spider-Man really got sidelined and sidetracked with all those tie-ins to like War of the Realms. They got tied into there's a couple of Absolute Carnage was another one when it really derailed the series. So he needs to get that momentum back because the sales on Amazing Spider-Man have dipped down. They're under 70,000 now, which is crazy. 3-4 months ago they were over 80. So he's got time. It's not right around the corner, but it's coming up. So if Nick Spencer, he needs to up his game if he wants people to come along with him for that 850th issue and be excited for it.
All right, so we got to talk about a major problem that Marvel is having that I've noticed, and I think we've often talking about it. Character development or character de-evolution. Like I noticed it with the X-Men, with Professor X and Moira McTaggart. And Phil Coulson, Agent of Mephisto? Are these changes these are very out of character moments. So in your humble opinion, are these changes permanent or are they going to fade away?
Well, with Coulson, I would imagine it's definitely not permanent. He's obviously he's in line with Mephisto. Mephisto brought him back from the dead, and he's going to be fighting fake Nick Fury in the Infinite Destinies like backup story. There's going to be a super spy versus super spy story. Hopefully at the end he's redeemed. Maybe Nick Fury brings him back from hell and he's redeemed as a character. So I don't imagine that's forever. And I don't think the X-Men changes are forever there either. I'm certain that there's something going on in Dawn of X. Although I do want to point out that Jonathan Hickman did a pretty good job with that Moira McTaggart like change because, back when I think it was during Claremont's time, there were some real questions about Moira McTaggart because there were events that happened that only affected mutants.
Like Proteus.
Yes. Well, there were events that happened that only affected mutants, but they affected Moira McTaggart, but she was human. And everyone was like, she's human. Why would she be affected by this? And he's done a good job addressing that turns out she was a mutant the whole time. You just didn't know it. And her mutant ability is reincarnation. So that is definitely staying. There's no way that part's going away. Is she evil or is she good? If she's evil, they certainly set it up well with all the things that they introduced in House of X Powers of 10 as far as all the things that she's witnessed over time and the ultimate destruction of the mutant race every single time in every timeline. She's on her 10th lifetime now, so she's seen it 9 times. She's experienced it 9 times. And as far as the X-Men, yes, they're all out of character. The only one that's in character is Magneto. Well, Apocalypse a little bit. But they're the bad guys, and they're following their dreams now. And, obviously Charles Xavier's characterization is really off. He's abandoned
especially his showdown with the Fantastic Four. I've never seen Sue Storm that angry before.
Yes. It seems quite out of character for Charles Xavier to show up at Yancey Street looking to kidnap children from their parents.
Yeah, and the thing is, with do you think this is going to set up for an Avengers versus X-Men 2? Because there's no way that Steve Rogers, Tony Stark, and Black Panther and Carol Danvers are going to let this happen.
Absolutely, yeah. So obviously right now we're getting the X-Men Fantastic Four miniseries from Chip Zdarsky. Just great. Chip Zdarsky is one of the best writers.
Chip. He's really good.
My bad. He's the best writer at Marvel Comics. He's even better than Hickman. His Daredevil is just fantastic. But it is leading. It does appear to be leading to a Avengers versus X-Men or an Illuminati versus X-Men. I'm not really sure which one, but it feels like that's where it's going. But if you look at the history of Krakoa, when you go back to Giant Size X-Men when it was introduced, Krakoa's never really been an ally of the mutants. When the island was introduced, it was feeding on them, and it would basically let Cyclops escape to lure more mutants back so it could feed on them. So I think that there's a great chance that what we're seeing as far as characterization and motivations are Charles Xavier and all the other mutants, the heroes, being distorted or being changed by Krakoa, which is kind of feeding on them and maybe kind of feeding on them emotionally and changing who they are at the core. You'll notice one character that doesn't really get affected very much is Wolverine. Throughout time, whenever Wolverine, when people try to adjust his mind or attack him telepathically because of his healing abilities, he's very hard to do that to. And he is one of the few characters that is maintained within Dawn of X that is really, when you read him, he feels like the original Wolverine. And I think that's probably why, because the island probably can't affect him because he's always rehealing himself.
And we also got to talk about the death of Kitty Pryde, which it caught me by surprise. I was ticked off.
I somewhat dipped out of Marauders, but it is getting really confusing to keep all the track of this, because I know I'm seeing Kitty Pryde's in the water and like Lockheed's there, and did he live? Probably should have done this with Lockheed, not Kitty Pryde, if I'm being completely honest.
Because the thing is, Kitty is probably the heart and soul of the X-Men community, and we already see, and we have all the characters that been back and come back. I think Kitty is like the heart, and if this was a plan by Krakoa to get rid of someone that could talk sense into all of them.
Well, Krakoa has certainly been keeping her off the island for a reason. We assume, I think there's a bit of an assumption that maybe it's the security on Krakoa keeping her out, but I think it's really the island itself. And but it's weird when you read that X-Men Fantastic Four story. There's Kitty Pryde. She's in a different uniform. She looks like her old self. She doesn't have knuckle tattoos. These are clearly happening out of place. And if she gets resurrected without the knuckle tattoos and the alcoholism that we were seeing in Marauders, it might not be the worst thing to happen. But I was surprised they killed her off. Especially she's supposed to be ascending to the red. The Red Queen is as far as the red seat on the Quiet Council of Krakoa, and is she going to be able to sit there when you've got we got the Black King sitting there as well?
And not to mention you have Mystique and Exodus and Sinister and Apocalypse on that council.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's lots of crazy stuff, and Mystique's been we end up learning Mystique's been treated very badly. Like Charles Xavier is using her marriage to the love of her life and holding it over her and saying, "I'll resurrect your wife when you do what I want you to do." Just evil, disgusting stuff out of Charles Xavier.
That's why I said out of character.
Absolutely, yeah. That's why I think it's Krakoa is affecting them. Or of course, it could not really be Charles Xavier. There are other options.
Mastermind.
Yeah, and so there are options. Although he was resurrected, so I would imagine it is him. But I do think he's been corrupted. I think everyone on the island's been corrupted. We know when they are resurrected, they're physically improved, and I think when they are resurrected, maybe spiritually they're not improved. Maybe something, a piece of them is missing, which it looks like they're going to talk about soon. We know we assume that there's two Vulcans out there now. We know there's one with the X-Men and Cyclops, and we just got word in the last X-Men issue that Vulcan never died when they thought they did. So there's an original version of Vulcan, and there's a resurrected version of Vulcan. I can't wait to see the two side by side and see if we determine if one of them has a soul.
And not to mention the Shi'ar Empire as well, too, because Vulcan definitely did a lot of damage to them, and there's no way Gladiator is doing that. But at the same time, we've got to wrap things up. What are some of in your humble opinion, if you look at both companies side by side, what are the major projects that fans should keep their eye on as 2020 continues?
Well, obviously at DC Comics, it's all leading up to Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo's Dark Knight's Death Metal. I think, the one thing that even even if you don't like the story, you know what it's going to be? It's going to be a ton of fun. I think those one-shots are going to be great. The real big story is the reception to Generation 5. I don't think it's the Marvel Now or the DCU that people think it is. I don't think it's an opportunity to change out the classic heroes with new diverse characters. I think it's like Age of Apocalypse. We're going to see a different future that they're going to have to go back and fix to get back to our timeline. And I think that could be cool. Whether people accept it or not, that remains to be seen. As far as Marvel, there's a lot of events coming up. We're certainly leading up to this Null arriving on Earth, which was set up in Absolute Carnage, which I think will be a huge event. Whether it arrives by the end of the year, I think it will. And then also, we're getting 2 X-Men events this year. I don't see anything being bigger than that. Ten of Swords is coming up quite soon, and then we're also getting a Winter X-Men event. X-Men is the hottest thing in comics right now, and I see Marvel Comics continuing to ride that wave. If you're looking for some things at both companies that are a little off the beaten path, The Last God at DC Comics Black Label is awesome. If you like fantasy comics, go check that out. And Daredevil by Chip Zdarsky at Marvel is probably the best superhero comic in all of the business right now.
Awesome. So why should my listeners check out Thinking Critical?
Well, if you have a passion for comics and you like, fun news that, it's not dry. We try to keep it entertaining, but we try to be completely honest with our audience. I will never, I never feed a line of BS. If I don't like something, I'm going to tell you I don't like it. If I like something, I'm going to tell you I like it. And we're going to disagree, but it's fun disagreeing. I love the interaction with the commenters. I try to read and react and respond to every single comment on my channel. And we try to be interactive that way. We're all about open discussion, talking about comic books. This is a thing that we all love. We're all passionate about it. So, that's what the channel is there for people to come there, to interact about comics, talk about the stuff we love, talk about all the news and what it all means, and just come together. That's what the channel's all about. And everyone's, of course, welcome. We love new viewers, and we do a fun stream every Saturday called the Comics Aficionados, and it's a 2-hour break every week. You won't hear about any of the negativity going out in the world. You might hear about some negativity in the comic world, but it's only about comic book. It's only about comic books by comic book fans and retailers, and it's what we love to do.
Awesome. So where can my listeners find you to connect on social media?
Well, I am on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. I also have a Discord server. If you go to my channel and view any of my videos, in the channel description, there's a Discord server. If you would like to go in there, we can interact on there. We share pages of comic books and stuff like that. There's also some audio chat rooms and things like that. If you want to talk to me, you can DM me there as well. And of course, my YouTube channel, Thinking Critical.
Awesome, guys. Well, you can connect with me on Jake's Take, jakes-take.com. You can check me out, Jacob Elishar, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I also have a YouTube channel as well. And also, you can check out the Jake's Take with Jacob Elishar podcast. They're on Spreaker and Apple Podcasts. Wes, I had so much fun talking comics with you today.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate you giving me the invite on the channel. I love talking comics. We had a lot of fun. It's too bad we didn't have a couple hours to just keep talking comics forever.
I totally agree. Maybe next time. Alrighty, guys. Wes, thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Peace. Not bad.